everyone, and welcome back to the Warsaw Security Forum, one of the biggest defense and security events in Central and Eastern Europe. I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska, and now we're going to speak to my next guest, Anton Hofreiter, the member of Bundestag, as well as the member of the Committee on EU Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Let's begin by looking at the political landscape of Europe as of recent, with the rise of Eurosceptic right-wing parties among those countries in the European Union, with the tendency of veering towards policies that are more isolationist, that internationally cooperational. How do you think this could possibly affect the defense cooperation in the long term?
The problem with this Eurosceptic right-wing populistic parties, it's not only that they are anti-democratic, but they are mostly pro-Russian, and so they pose a real danger for the security and peace of whole of Europe. And of course they try to intervene the cooperation because they are not the, in the end they are the proxies of Putin. And so we have to learn better as democratic parties to fight them, and we have also to realize within Europe that Russia is attacking us also in the information room, and then we have to become better to stop Russian propaganda, make our society more fragile, especially in Western Europe and Southern Europe.
When we're looking at the popularity of those parties, you said that the democratic parties need to fight in order to be able to preserve democracy in those countries where those particular fractions are gaining popularity. But these people are usually elected by the majority of people within the society of such country. So how do we fight this, and how do we actually educate people on what the true dangers of this are?
Also, first of all, as I already said, we have to fight Russian propaganda, because the information sphere is full of Russian propaganda, especially on TikTok, but also on X, on Telegram, and even more platforms. That's one of the first issues. And most of this stuff is already illegal, but we are not able to force through our laws. That we have to change. Then we have to be clear and to speak clear what these parties are. Some of these parties, or all of these parties, are, as you said, democratically elected. But at least in Germany, the right-wing extremists are so extremistic and so anti-democratic. They are democratically elected, but they are not democratic parties. And we have to tell these people clearly. And with this part, we don't have to speak about right-wing populism. We have to speak about right-wing extremism, and that's anti-democratic. Then the next thing, say what is. Then third thing is, democratic governments must deliver. It does not help when democratic governments are in quarrel all times, when they don't show good results. So in general, democratic countries have to deliver, and also we have to speak out clearly what is the threat from Russia and also China. That's a difference between Eastern, Central, Eastern and Nordic part of Europe, but in Germany, in some Eastern Western countries, we don't speak so clearly how big the threat is from Russia for our democracies.
Do you think it's just it's a momentary change, this sort of, I would say, voters' fascination with right-wing parties, or is this something that could potentially have long-term repercussions?
We see in many countries it's long-term. When you look to Austria, it's now more than 20 years. When you look to Belgium, it's more than 20 years. When you look to Italy, it's more than 20 years. So we have it's a long-term phenomenon, and we need long-term energy to deal with it. And slowly, I would hope fast, but to slowly solve the problem.
Do you think that this could potentially lead to some sort of I would say, political paralysis when it comes to governments of those countries, but also to the European Union structures?
Yeah, it could. If we make too much mistakes, if we continue on mistakes, look what's going on in France, look what just happened in Austria. Now, democratic parties have the challenge that they make it totally clear to the people that the alternatives are within democratic parties. So we have to make it clear that there are big differences, and there are big differences between the solution of democratic parties. And on the other hand, we have to work together when it comes to security, to defend Europe, when it comes to defend democracy. That's a big challenge for democratic parties, but they must not fail.
I would like to slightly change the subject now, although still staying in Germany, because according to a report which was published by Die Zeit, we know that there is a chance for German Chancellor Olaf Scholz to actually make the first phone call to Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, in 2 years. This particular information comes from that very report. But I wanted to ask your opinion whether or not such a phone call would be possible, and if so, what it would be about.
If such a phone call should be helpful, it depends what Germany is doing. In the moment, Germany is the second largest military supporter of Ukraine, but we still do not enough, because Putin still believes that in the long term he will win the war. And as long as he believes he gets everything by war, why should he talk about peace? So it would be helpful to talk to Putin if he would deliver as much military support for Ukraine that it's totally clear that in the long term Russia will lose the war. As long as we don't do it, I don't see it so helpfully to talk to him, because he is in a too strong position in the moment, and we have to change this. We have to invest enough that Ukraine and Europe becomes in a stronger position.
What's your opinion? We had this guest before, the member of the Ukrainian parliament, Kira Rudik, and in an interview with us, she said that the only language that Russia understands is the language of power, basically. And if you want to win the war, you just have to fight Putin, because nothing else is actually going to work. Do you think that this is the right opinion? What's your view on that?
I think the only language the regime of Putin understands is French. And we should stop provocating Putin by showing weakness. And so we have to do more, and especially Germany has to do more. We are, when it comes to economic power, the second largest powerful democracy in the world. We are third, but kind of could hardly call the democracy. So we are, as a democracy, coming directly after the US, and so we have to do more, and to show Russia that we are strong, that we will not fail Ukraine, that we do enough, and then you can talk to Putin if you have shown this. But to show this, we have to do more.
Do you think that such a show of support from Germany, an increased show of support, even more than has been done now, is possible with so many domestic problems that Germany is facing right now?
It's, I think, possible and necessary, because many of the domestic problems we are facing are caused by war. The inflation was caused by war.
A lot of the European problems and global problems have been caused.
The energy crisis was caused by the war. Also by German stupidity when it comes to Nord Stream 1 and 2. We were too dependent from Russia. But in the end, it was caused by the Russian aggression, by the Russian war against Ukraine. So I think if we would be stronger and end this war, we would be more able to solve our domestic problems. And that is the thing we have to explain to people. If you want cheaper energy, if you want peace, if you want that we can again focus on economic and social issues, first we have to end this war. And to end this war, we have to show strength.
I wanted to take a moment to go back to the point about the possible phone call taking place between Olaf Scholz and Vladimir Putin ahead of the G20 summit in Brazil in November. The Italian newspaper La Repubblica apparently citing parliamentary sources, reported on September 9th, so already some time ago, that Olaf Scholz and his party members are developing a plan similar to the Minsk agreements, which we know were not very successful, which could involve the potential handover of some occupied Ukrainian territories. How likely do you think this scenario would be? And do you think that it would be ever successful with the US or the UK?
I think this scenario is not likely because the Greens, also part of the Social Democrats, are totally against such a scenario. And I think too many important countries within Europe realize that it will never work, and they are against this scenario. And I think the people who are in favor of this scenario will realize it in the end.
It's now time in our interview for me to take us slightly further away from our neighborhood, our European neighborhood, all the way to the U.S., considering the upcoming U.S. presidential elections, and a possibility of Donald Trump winning the office of the President of the United States again. And especially after he gave an interview to Lex Friedman recently, and he said that he has a very exciting plan how to stop Ukraine and Russia, I quote. And he said that he has a certain idea, but he's not going to reveal it because part of the plan is a surprise. We also know that there's a sort of an idea of a peace plan that he has for Ukraine. If that scenario would be to take place, if he would take the office of the President of the United States, what do you think would be the future of Ukraine?
I think then it depends totally on Europe. But despite, even if Trump is not elected, which I really hope that he is not elected, Europe has to grow up and be able to look for its own security. Europe is one of the richest areas on this whole planet, and we are so far totally dependent when it comes to security and peace on the US. That has to change because it becomes every day more complicated.
But wouldn't you, sorry to interrupt you, but wouldn't you say that this notion is definitely changing, looking at the amount of GDP being spent per capita by different European countries, and even the fact that we are here right now during the Warsaw Security Forum?
I hope it will change, but it's not changing fast enough. And at least countries like Germany, France, Italy, Spain, big European countries so far are not doing enough. Poland may do enough. And when I look what you're doing, you do enough. But I don't want to offend Poland, but it's not enough if Poland, the Baltic states, Finland and Sweden do enough. Also, other European countries have to do more.
And last but not least, considering the recent Ukrainian losses of territory to Russia, I wanted to ask if, also considering the Iranian attack on Israel, do you think that these losses in Ukraine might be somehow related to the attention being diverted away from the Ukrainian war effort simply because there is more attention going to the Middle East right now?
Yes, a little bit, but I think things are also interconnected because Iran is helping Russia a lot with missiles and drones. And if you put on much more pressure on Iran and force them not to support Russia anymore against Ukraine, that would also help Ukraine. And so I think when we look at the situation, maybe not in the beginning, but now conflicts are interlinked. And we see when the conflict started, Ukraine had to defend itself against Russia.
So putting pressure on Iran would be putting pressure eventually on Russia as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Lovely. Thank you so much for this very interesting conversation on those most burning issues facing Europe and the rest of the world. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Anton Hofreiter, the member of the Bundestag and the member of the Committee on EU Affairs. My name was Klaudia Czerwińska. Please stay tuned here on TVP World for more news and features.